All right, so we're going to start our product stuff today. We talked about that before, getting the reference for it, getting that stuff set up. I'm going to show you this really neat tool that one of the videos I was watching, they were really talking about this pretty cool tool. It's called Pure Ref. So typically when I was using Pinterest, oops, I would have my Pinterest page right here. And if I scoot that over and go to this, and then go to my product somewhere in here. There it is. This is great because obviously I can see this, but it's always in the way, or I'm constantly like switching back and forth between Cinema and this. This Pure Ref tool, it's a free tool you can download and install. You can just drag stuff into this, and then it'll just stay right here. So you can move it around, you can zoom in and out of it, you can rotate the images, and then you can work on your Cinema while this is still kind of like sitting nested over here. You could also, if I remember the hotkey, right-click and drag this to anywhere you want this to be. So it's really a neat tool as you're doing this kind of modeling thing to have as your area to put all your reference. You can save these and reload them. For something like the product, doesn't really come in handy too much to do because we're kind of like in the product for a short amount of time. Usually what I would use this tool for, if I can hit my back button, is more like this kind of stuff. As I'm doing like a character and I'm like sculpting what their head is going to look like and adding the muscles and the veins and the bones and all that, typically I'll have these over here so I can constantly jump between a bunch of different references for, like, let's say this vein. I see it in the back, but what is it doing on the side? What is it doing in the front? Where is it going? Same thing with these muscles. This is what it does here, but what does it do on the side of the head or the front? I would have those kind of images there. So I want to show that, obviously, because this may be something that you find useful to have these kinds of things off to the side. For this project, I'm not going to use it, but again, I recommend using these kinds of things as you model, paint, anything, Photoshop, Illustrator, any of the stuff you do. People are using that Pure Ref tool all over the place, it seems. And I don't need to save that. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is just set up my folders. Make sure this is good. 2510, and here it is, Start going to Product. I have a Scenes folder, that's all I need right now. If I had references inside there and not Pinterest, I would have a reference folder and put my stuff inside that. Our goal with this assignment is that we're going to be building stuff inside of Cinema 4D. And then we're also going to be creating the labeling inside of like Photoshop or Illustrator, and then bringing those two things together. So we should be shooting for more of a photorealistic rendering inside of Cinema, okay? If you want this to be complicated, you can definitely make it complicated. Usually that turns out worse, especially for beginners. Keep it simple. If you keep it simple, everything goes much more smoother than trying to create these intricate, crazy shapes that you then have to put a label on and it just doesn't work, okay? So I'm actually going to go with, oops, if I can pull this up, shaving cream. I'm going to go with just a very simple shape. I'm going to do a shaving cream bottle, and I'm going to do the shaving cream bottle with the cap on. 100 times easier than doing it with the cap off because then I have to do also this stuff. Okay, when I do my texturing for this, I pick my colors. The cap's not going to be transparent. The cap will be a solid color. So again, I don't have to model anything on the inside of it, right? You're better off trying to shoot for something where it is just like that, a nice background, nice coloring, nice label, nice lighting, versus trying to, like, you know, I want to create every single piece of this thing down to like the little threads that would be right there that you don't even see, but I still want to put those in. It's too much. Okay, so I'll show a couple different shapes, but that's the one I'm going to start with. So I'm going to show you two different methods. One of them is basically, it's called box modeling, which we've already done. On our environment, we started off with a very basic shape, and then we kind of deformed that shape a bit to create what we want it to look like. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to start off with a simple shape. It's a cylinder, so I'm going to start off with a cylinder. Even though it's a box modeling, it just means starting off with a very simple, low-resolution shape. I'm going to turn on my divisions so I can see this. As you work, you always want to be looking at your divisions. You want to make sure that the divisions are nice and smooth. If the divisions are nice and smooth, the shape will be nice and smooth. No product out there really has like a round bottle where it's all like jaggedy and bumpy. It doesn't happen. You're all pretty smooth. I'm going to lower my amount of divisions to about 12. That seems like a pretty good number to go with. And I'm going to, I'll do 2. I'll leave one with the cap on, and I'll take the cap off of another one. So I'm just going to duplicate this for a second, okay? Turn the cap off. All right, so this is why I duplicated it, just to show you. I'm at the point where I now need to kind of deform the surface and add some divisions and start to control more of what it's going to look like. If we just looked with you know, our glasses on and we were about 10 feet away, then this model is pretty perfect. But we're not. We're close to the computer screen. It doesn't look anything like that Gillette bottle from there, okay? So I'm going to hit C on this one. I'm going to hit C on that one, okay? Now when we hit C, that means that we can go in there and start editing the points, adding new divisions, tweaking what the original shape looked like. So on this one here, I'm going to go to this one first. I'm going to switch to points. This is points, this is edges, this is faces. So each one of these allow me to control different parts of this. So I'm going to grab the point here and I'm just going to move it, okay? Now this is the one with the cap, and you can see that those two things are not connected, okay? By default, for whatever reason, Cinema doesn't automatically connect all the points when you have a cylinder and the caps to it. Now it's not a big deal to do that, to connect everything. We just have to be aware that that's something that we need to do, okay? If we created a cube, all those pieces are connected. If we created a cone, the cone is one piece, the cap is another. Anytime you see the cap, that's going to be something that you need to weld or join in on top of it, okay? So I'm going to go to my selection tool, and I'm going to use this rectangle. Some of the options that we need to look at, my options are not always going to be the same as yours. You come in one day, they might have one options. You come in another day, somebody else might have come in there, set some other stuff up, and then you don't realize it, okay? You go home and work, sometimes you change stuff, whatever. So anytime we do a selection tool, we should look at the options and see what they do. Typically, we only need to play with a couple of them, but just so you're aware. One of them is tolerance selection, okay? So what that means is if I select something or I'm close to selecting it, it'll automatically select that item, right? So if I did this and I just marqueed, it grabs all of those. That's not anything special. If I went to faces, though, and I marqueed these, notice how it just selected the top ones. It didn't select anything on the bottom. If I switch this to tolerant and then I marquee it, it'll grab those too because my cursor went and selected, the line hit those faces, okay? So again, something you want to be aware of is sometimes you want that on there, sometimes you don't, depending on what we're trying to select. The other thing that we have is only select visible elements. If I click this on and I marquee, okay, it's selected. You'll see it only selected like half of this, okay? Even though these ones are visible, for whatever reason, it doesn't consider those visible. I'm going to rotate a little bit, marquee it, rotate a little bit, marquee it. We lost more that time. It really doesn't like us selecting those other ones, right? So it's kind of weird what it's doing. I don't know why it's not selecting all those. Let me just marquee, let me turn on tolerant and then do that. Okay. Now you'll see too, with this only visible, it only selects stuff that's visible. So typically if I'm trying to marquee something, I don't want to grab the stuff that's on the back side. That's when I'll have that only visible highlighted. I'm pretty good about not selecting stuff that I don't want to, that I don't need, so I don't typically have that one on, okay? So for this, I'm going to turn tolerant off, I'm going to turn only visible off, and I'm just going to marquee all the points for this. So now it's hard to see, but we actually have the points for the cap and the points for the cylinder are right on top of each other. So we're selected all the points. Then I'm going to right click. This menu we will jump into and we will use a whole lot in the remaining assignments in this class. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go down to this optimize. And what that basically does, it's kind of a weird word or a weird way to put it, but it basically goes through and any points that are on top of each other or close, it'll snap them together and actually like weld them, okay? Now the reason I say it's a weird thing, because there's also one called weld, okay? It's like, the weld one is more individual. I want to go point by point and connect the ones. This is more like overall, I just want to combine these things together. You'll see in some of these, they'll have a little gear. Anytime you see a little icon after that, even when you get into the next level of 3D, Maya, there will be an option box, okay? You click on that, you'll get options. You can change what that setting is. So if we go to this, we can see what the options are: polygons, unused points, points, and then a tolerance. Don't have to worry about anything else except for that number. Right now it should be fine. All the points are exactly on top of each other. If I were to have moved them, even like a hair away, this optimize wouldn't put those points together, okay? If I increase this tolerance, then it'll look at a bigger radius and then start putting stuff together, okay? So I'm just gonna hit OK. I'm gonna switch back to my move tool, click off, click on the point, and then move it, and you'll see that those are now welded together, okay? So I created a cylinder, it had caps, I hit C, grabbed all the points, optimized, done. It's all one piece now. This one that doesn't have a cap, sometimes, depending on how wild I'm feeling that day, I may make a cylinder with no cap and then just add it afterwards, okay? A different way to do it, I'm gonna go to Edges, I'm gonna right click, and then another option inside here is to close hole. Where is it at? Right there, close polygon hole. And if I just come over here and click on the edge, it'll close it. Come over here, click on this edge, close it. Okay, I don't have to do any optimizing. It automatically will seal the thing together, okay? So if you accidentally leave the cylinder cap on, you can still get this. If you leave it off, you can do that, whatever, okay? You have to know several ways because chances are you're gonna hit it one way or the other. Now we will notice the divisions up here are different than the divisions there. For what we're doing right now, it doesn't matter, but just be aware that sometimes it will matter and we will want to have those divisions. I'm gonna delete this other cylinder and just stick with this one. Every time we model something, never move it away from the origin, okay? I modeled this cylinder. I didn't move it left and right, forward, back, even up and down. I've just left it exactly where it's at. And the reason for that is that as I start building stuff, everything is kind of centralized around that origin. So I don't want to take it and like shift it over because now everything is screwed up, okay? You may have experienced that on your environments. The second you start moving stuff away and you try to use a cloner, now it thinks that the pivot is way back here even though your object is way over there. Or if you're trying to do like a radial cloning, it's cloning around this point, not around the point that you're over there, okay? So every single time I model a character, a building, a car, anything, it stays right there, okay? The most advanced I'll get with it is maybe I will just, for OCD purposes, I'll put it on the ground. That's the only thing I will do, just move it directly up and that's it. In this case, I'm just gonna leave it where it is. All right, so there's my basic cylinder. Now this looks already hideous. It's very blocky, that's fine. This is block modeling or box modeling. I need to add some divisions. So looking at this canister, we can see a couple things that we're going to pay attention to. Number one, this is rounded right here at the top. Okay, we can't see the very top of it. I would imagine it's perfectly flat once we get to that level. But right here, this is nice and rounded. It's kind of a big rounding. Way down here at the bottom, this is also rounded. It's a little bit tighter though. Right here, this comes up pretty straight, and then it kind of rounds into this area, and then the cap kind of goes on top of it, okay? So those are elements for this product that I need to emulate inside of my 3D. So I'm gonna go to my Edges tool. I'm gonna go here and just double click. That will select all the points around it. If at any point the hotkeys aren't working, like double clicking doesn't do that, you might have messed something up, and we'll go through some troubleshooting stuff too. So I'm going to take that edge, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go down here to bevel. Okay, so this bevel is the same bevel that we had on other tools for adding in that rounding. Okay, now this is also something that I could have done right away. I could have said I want to create caps and do fillets on it, is what they call it in there. But it'll fillet both sides, not just the one. And I want to have control over the top one, because obviously the top one is a lot more rounded than the bottom one. So I want to have complete control over both of those. Okay, so I'm going to go to bevel. Everyone is going to do the same exact thing. They're going to click the wrong thing. They're going to select things not the correct way. I do it all the time. People in the advanced classes do it all the time. Noah does it all the time, right? Oh. Selecting the wrong things, right? All the time. Yeah. So it's no big deal. We just have to be aware of it, and we have to figure out that we've done it, then undo and select the right thing. So I've selected that loop around. I'm in the bevel tool. I'm going to click and drag on the edge, and that will create that bevel. Okay? Now, depending on how deep I go with this is going to control how thick that rounding is. So looking at this one, you can see that's definitely a specific amount. We don't need to know the exact number. We're artists. We just kind of make sure it looks similar. If we went to something like this, you can see that this is also very bevel-y, right? It's very rounded, but it's a lot wider, right? So we just want to be aware of what we're trying to accomplish here. So I'm just going to click and drag. I'm going to zoom out too so I can kind of see this from afar. Once I've clicked and drug and I have divisions there, I don't want to do it again. Because if I click and drag on this again, it's going to think that I want to then, oops, come on, bevel those faces too, and that will cause some issues later, okay? So once I do this, like so, all of my changing is going to happen over here, okay? And that'll be true for every single tool that we use. One of the tools we use is extrude. Options will be there. Splitting, options will be there. Beveling, options will be there. So I'm going to take this and make sure this is, chamfer is fine. I'm going to put in some subdivisions. Okay, so subdivisions will make this round. I don't need it to be perfectly round. I don't need to put in like, oops, like that many divisions. That's like kind of overkill. Usually like 3 to 4 is a good amount. So 3 to 4 is appropriate. If I need this to change the thickness, I'll go to the offset and just click and drag. Okay, you can also click and drag this. And that's why it helps to be kind of zoomed out too, so you can kind of look at your reference and then say, yeah, that's probably good, maybe a little bit more. And again, we're not getting it 100%, we're just kind of getting it close, right? So that looks pretty good. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. So I'm going to switch back to my move tool, double click this, right click, and then go to bevel. Now I hate right clicking, I hate extra clicks. I want to just do everything as quickly as possible. On the right side of every single one of these, you'll see a letter, a squiggly, and another letter. That's the hotkey for it. It'd be great if it was one, it's not. So in order to get to bevel, we have to type M and S. So I'm going to take a drink first. Then I'm going to hit M, don't move my mouse. These are all the hotkeys associated with M. When I click that, everything comes up. If I then hit S, now I'm in the bevel tool, okay? It might seem weird to hitting 2 hotkeys or any of that. It might take some time to get used to. The more time you spend doing these, the easier it'll be where you're not even thinking about it. You just hit MS and then boom, you're there. So now I'm going to click and drag. Cinema will automatically jump to the defaults for the last one. So whatever settings you put on the last one, it automatically does it. Not a big deal here. We're just going to kind of bring that a bit smaller. Again, looking at the before and after, that looks pretty good. Okay. Now, how are my proportions? Let me look at them side by side. Does it look like they have the same proportions? Somebody say no, or hell no. Okay, way off, right? This one is tall and skinny. This one's kind of like medium and a little bit girthier. So I need to change those, right? Now I should have originally, when I created my original cylinder, gone in there and made sure the proportions were locked. But it doesn't matter. I can change those things at any point, okay? So I'm going to go back to my selection tool, go back to points, which is typically the tool I'll use for this. I'm going to marquee the points. Okay, make sure I have the whole top selected, and then I can drag this up and try to get this to be a bit more in proportion to what I was doing. Now you'll notice that I didn't scale it. Okay, any idea what would happen if I just took this and scaled it? What would it do? It would jack it up, right? So if I went here and I scaled this, let's say I scaled it down. Look what happened to my bevel. Right? It scales the bevel down too, and so now we don't have this perfectly round bevel, we have this like squished bevel. If I stretched it up vertically, same thing, it would stretch it out and it would look weird, okay? So anytime we're adjusting those kinds of proportions, we want to just grab points and move them up or move them down. And also be aware that we don't want to move them in left and right. A common thing people will do is that they'll just grab this and move it, thinking that it's straight. But realistically, I just kind of like tilted it off to the side, right? So I want to make sure that I move it. I grab just the arrow and stretch it up like that. Okay, cool. So that feels a lot better there. Now I need to create this dividing line right down the center, or not the center, but the cap area. So I'm going to go into my edges because I need to add an edge. I'm going to go to my move tool. This is typically like my default tool I jump to is just that move. I just stay in that pretty much all the time. I'm going to right click and I'm going to look in here for a tool that would allow me to add divisions. In every 3D app, there's typically 3 things you're going to be doing: extruding, beveling, and inserting edge loops, or inserting edges is the 3 things. You can do most of your modeling if you can do those 3 things just with those 3 tools. The rest is pretty much clean up and repair. So here, this section right there, line cut, plane cut, loop path cut, these 3 are all, and I guess edge cut too, is all things that we could do to add different divisions. Now we only need to use one of these, which is going to be this loop path cut, okay? So I'm going to go to loop path cut, and you'll see that as I drag my mouse on top of this, I haven't clicked anything, I'm just dragging my mouse, it's telling me this is where you can add a new edge, okay? So I need to add an edge right here where that division is going to be. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it again. If it helps you, especially as you're a beginner model, you can kind of actually just like lay this out, like proportion-wise, like where is this that's about the same height? Go across here, go over here, and then bring it in, okay? I don't like to do that, so I'm just going to eyeball it to about there. That feels right. That feels like the cap and where it would come up. Now I need to add a little bit of a rounding here so it'll go in, and I need to make sure the cap is there. So I have a decision to make. Do I want this to be all one piece, or do I want to separate this into 2 different pieces, okay? If I separate into 2 different pieces, down the line I could always come back and add the top part if I wanted to, that little pushing button area that the foam comes out. If I don't want to, then I don't have to. I'm going to keep it as one piece for this, but then I'll show on the next one how I can create 2 different pieces. So I have one division. I could go through, click off, and then add another division here for the cap part. Come in here, drag another division in. Okay, so I have 3 divisions. And then I can go to my move tool and double click this one, and then just use my scale tool to scale this in, and then push it up. And what we'll see is that I now get that. I now get this thing that looks like it's coming up, curving in, and then it's going to where the cap is. Okay, so that looks like that's what that's doing. Now you'll notice, you guys have seen cans before, right? Right? Okay. The bottom of a can, what does it look like? Right, it's like caved in, right? I didn't do any of that. I didn't do that because my can is never going to be laying down. I'm never going to see the bottom of it. So there's no point in me adding that to it. Now you go to like a video game asset where this can is an item my character can shoot. Yeah, I want to have that concaved area at the bottom, okay? Or I'm going to have one laying down this way and one standing up that way. I might see different things, and I may want to include those items inside of it, okay? So modeling-wise, this is like a hair almost done, okay? I'm going to make this bigger. The last step in this is to get rid of the chunkiness of it. I need to get rid of all the blockiness and make this nice and smooth. That's where this one's going to come in. So we kind of saw that in the last assignment. This is going to subdivide. So it's going to take all the divisions here, double them, and smooth out all the stuff, okay? So if I hold down Alt, I click on that. Try that again. Click cylinder, hold down Alt, click that. Now we have twice as many divisions. You can see the number right here, 2. It's actually 4 times as many because that's twice and then that's 4. I'm going to turn my divisions off so we can go back to this. And now we have that. Now we'll see that the cap area here looks good. There looks pretty good. But this here looks pretty weak. Like that looks like it's a dent or something. It doesn't look like a cap division. So I'm going to turn my subdivision off by clicking this. Now I'm back to my original shape. I'll turn my divisions back on so we can see them. And again, look at the NB, right? That's that hotkey. So if I want to do, click over here, NA to get those off, NB to get those back on, you can do that. Anytime we do a subdivision, it's going to take, let's say, these 3 points here, and it's going to average them. Okay? So if I have this point, and this point, well, it's going to create a nice smooth line between them. So whenever I have a spot where I need it to basically hold that shape, like I need it to hold this middle finger area here and go like more like straight and then round and then straight and then round, I need to add more divisions, okay? So if I jump back to my edges, I jump back to my right click, I jump back to loop path cut. I can zoom in here and I can add, you're so close, there, and division there, add a division here, add a division there. So what this is going to do is these 3 divisions here will hold that cap edge nice and tight. These 3 divisions right here will hold that inner lip really tight. And then this one, that's fine. I want that to be nice and rounded, okay? The closer your divisions are, the tighter your shapes are going to be. The further apart, the smoother they're going to be. So now I'm just going to hit this little box, go back to my object, my model, there we go, go back to the red tool, NA, there we go. And you'll see now this feels a lot more like we have 2 different surfaces, metal and then the cap, okay? Especially from way back here, we can definitely see a difference in what that's looking like, right? Now let's pretend this looked like garbage. I would click this, delete it, make a new one. As you do these, you should become super quick at creating these kinds of shapes. To the point where if I said in class, I want you to make whatever, like this kind of simple shape, you should be able to create it within an hour and have it fully done from start to finish. So by the time you're done with this assignment, that's the goal, is for you to be able to take this thing that might take you a day or 2 days to build one shape and get it all set. By the time we're done, it's like an hour is how long it would take, okay? So there's one product. I'm going to label this Gillette. And I'm going to go to my layers. I'm going to make a new layer for this. There we go. And I'm going to turn it off, make it non-renderable, and assign both of those. Okay, so that was box modeling. Create a basic shape, add divisions, and start pushing and pulling, beveling, whatever else. This next one is spline modeling. So what we're going to do is very similar to like Illustrator. You're going to create a path, and then we're going to take that path and revolve it, and that will be our shape, okay? So I don't want to do any work in here in the perspective view. I need to work in the front view, side view, or top view, okay? So I'm going to middle click, and I'm going to go to either the right view or the front view. All right, I'm going to pick a different product here. So I'm going to go with wine glass. Now, this is an art class, this is a communications class, this is a creative class, so don't be afraid to think creatively, okay? So my plan for this is I'm going to have my shaving cream bottle, I'm going to have a wine glass, I'm going to have a frothy mix inside there, and that'll be like a weird thing, like why would someone do that? But that's the goal, okay? So my other object I'm going to do is going to be a wine glass. So obviously there's different profiles, there's different things that would look like wine glasses. I think I like maybe one of these. Ooh, fancy. Come on. All right. So we'll just use that, and I'm just going to move that over here. There we go. All right. So now I can see that. Actually, I'm going to go with this one. That one looks kind of neat. All right. Maybe I'll make both and then decide later. So I'm going to go with this one, I think. Just keep it nice and round. Okay. Now with this, we're going to notice a couple things. I got 2 pointers. Right here, this comes up pretty straight, and then it rounds pretty tight. We have a kind of medium roundness at the base of this. It comes up nice and smooth here, big roundness, and then it goes back up. Now we also have a thickness there, okay? We also have a bottom to the glass. Now the top part is hollow, so there's actually like a wall thickness. When we get to the bowl of the glass, that's all straight, okay? So I'm going to build this like I would build the entire glass, okay? Like I'm going to put the thickness in and everything. So I'm going to go to Create, I'm going to go to Spline, and there's a couple pen tools here. I'm just going to use this pen tool right at the top, okay? Very similar to Photoshop and Illustrator and all those. I'm going to draw the profile of what this thing would look like. So if I were just to draw like cut this in half and draw what that would look like, that's what I'm going to draw. Okay. I need this to be pretty accurate, so I'm going to go to my magnet here. I'm going to turn on snapping. I'm going to go to this magnet again. I'm going to turn on grid snap, which is down here. This is like so many things you have to click on. I wish it was just one button, but it's not. All right. And then I'm going to, you'll see it clicks. So as I move my mouse around, it's clicking. All right, so I'm going to click here. I'm going to click there. I'm not going to worry about the tiny roundness pieces right now. I'll get those later. I'll just add bevels. But I do want to get the big shapes of this. So I'm going to go, let's say here. That should be good about there. I'm going to click and drag. See handlebars come out. If the handlebars didn't come out, I clicked wrong. I undo. And then I just click and drag again. Okay. Now this green line I'm imagining is where the middle of this is going to be, where the center of that. So I don't want to ever go right up against it, except for at the start of it and the end of it, which will be way up here. Okay. So I'm going to go to here and just pull this out. I'm going to scooch up. I can adjust the points after, so I'm not too concerned about getting it perfect right now. Okay. We're looking at proportions. We'll adjust things as we go. I'm going to click and drag this. That's good. Click and drag. Actually, that seems pretty good right there. This is a lot bigger. You can see the stem of this, the holding part is a lot smaller. I'll move that after. That's not a big deal. All right, then I'm going to scoot in here and then try to just replicate this shape on the inside. So click and drag this. Pretty good. And then now I'm going to go to the center because I need this to touch right at that green line. So close. There you go. Okay. Now when I'm done, just switch back to the move tool or whatever. Any of the other tools work. Now I'm going to go to my selector, grab all the points, and just move them up. Now I have obviously a longer stem. This feels closer to that shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just trying to get the eyeballs direction of, you know, this thing isn't way out here and it's not like way far in there, right? It feels like proportionately, I'm hitting the right spots. Maybe these ones would come down a smidge, like that. That feels, I don't know. I'm going to turn my snapping off at this point. I really only needed it for the starting and the ending. And after that, I can really kind of customize what this looks like. I can grab the handlebars too, so I switch to my move tool, click and drag the handlebar, click and drag the handlebar. All right, so that feels pretty good. All right, so there's my shape. Again, if I messed up, delete it, make a new one. Delete it, make a new one. If you have to make 20 of these before you get a good one, then you make 20. All right, so now I'm going to jump back to my perspective. And there's the shape. Now, one thing you'll see, everyone does this, is that your sizes are always off. Okay, I modeled my Gillette can, there it is. I modeled the glass, there it is. I scaled them down later. All I look at modeling-wise is proportions. Does the glass itself feel like it's proportionate to what a real glass would look like? Does the Gillette can itself feel like it is the way it should be? Afterwards, I can scale it up or down or whatever I need to. All right, so I'm going to take this spline now. I'm going to go to my menu up here. That's the wrong one. I'm going to go to this one, and I'm going to go to Lathe. Okay, Maya calls it Revolve. I think 3ds Max also calls it Lathe. Not 100% sure. It's green, so the spline is going to go inside it. And now we have a wine glass. Okay, so it takes that initial shape, revolves it, and now we have our initial shape. Okay, or lathes it, whatever you want to call it. So now I'm going to look at it. Now that I see this in 3D, I want to look at it and see, does it feel still correct? A couple of things that I'm going to need to adjust. Typically, just like our can, the glass bottom is not perfectly flat. Typically, it does kind of taper upwards. So I do need to adjust that. I think that maybe the stem might be a little bit too thin. It feels like we've really, that's very, very fragile. And for a manly shaving cream like Gillette, that you just wouldn't drink out of it like that. So don't adjust anything in perspective. I'm going to jump back to the same view I drew it in, which was this one. I'm going to go back to my spline. I'm going to make sure my points are on. And then I'm just going to grab my points and then start adjusting. Okay, so that comes up like I want it to. That's fine. I need this to be a little bit thicker, so I'm going to go and grab the points here. I may not be able to see them, but once I start marqueing, then I can find out where they're at. I can also turn the lathe off, and then it's a lot more obvious. I'm just going to grab these, Scooch that over a bit, just a little bit. And then come back in here. That feels better, right? Maybe this could be adjusted some. There you go. Okay. Now I do need to adjust this bottom. Configure this. I'm going to turn my grid off. This is going to be annoying to see this grid all the time. Display, yes. Grid, where are you at? Oh, I forgot where the grid is. I don't turn it off all the time. There it is. Just passed it up. Okay. So this is actually coming to a point on the inside, so I'm going to need to fix that. I can't have it come to a point because it wouldn't look real. We also have these, which are hard edges. We need to smooth that out. This part looks okay there, but it looks like it might dip in and then come out. It doesn't look like a nice smooth transition. So I'm going to go and grab that point where I see the issue. I can use my move tool and just grab the handlebar. Maybe I can just tweak it that way. That seems to have fixed it. Or maybe just pull it out some. There we go. All right, so that feels pretty good now. All right, so let's adjust. So I'm going to go into my lathe here. And you'll see that I can't go and grab any points. So as I click on this and try to grab any divisions, marking it, it doesn't let me. A lathe is basically just like that original cylinder we created. It creates a shape. It's basically like this mathematically created shape. And if we want to do any tweaking to it, we have to hit the C key, and then we can edit the points and do all that. Okay? I don't like to get rid of this because if I come back later and I want a different shaped item but similar proportions, maybe I could use this as my starting point instead of starting from scratch. So looking at this other wine glass here, there's not a whole lot of difference in these two except for that corner. So I can always use that original curve, sharpen up those corners, and make a different glass within like 2 seconds. Same thing here, these are more rounded, so if I just change the profile, I can make basically a different rounding one. If I grab this there, go here, and I grab these and pull it up, you can see I can create a whole bunch of different shapes. Okay? So I'm not going to delete this or hit C yet. I'm going to duplicate it first and call this construction glass. And then make a new layer called construction. And then put that on it. Oops. Okay, now this one is my one that I'm going to model. So I'm going to hit C on it. I lost all editing abilities. That's fine. Nope, I want to hit undo first, sorry, real quick. I want to look at the divisions here. Okay, so this one has plenty of divisions. If we go to the lathe, we don't need caps, so I'm going to turn these off too. I forgot to do that. And I want to go to my object and tell it my subdivisions here should be about 12. Okay, just like we were doing before, we keep everything really low. That makes it easier for us going forward with our stuff. So set this to 12, then hit C. And then I can go to my edges. And then I'm going to add a little bit of beveling here. Let's go to, let's say, 2 divisions. Let's set this to 3. That's good. That seems pretty good there. I'm happy with that. Way down here at the bottom, I need to adjust this. So whenever we do a point and it's at the start or the end of it, we can't just like leave a point there without having some roundness. So originally when I created this, had I clicked and dragged the handlebar out, it would have created a nice rounding, or I could have created a nice rounding. I didn't, I missed that point. That's not a big deal. So I'm going to right click and go to Insert Loop Path Cut. And I'm going to drag my cursor, let's say about here in the middle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the points, the points for this and the points at the center all together. And if I do that, that'll create a nice rounding shape at the inside of that. So I need to grab the points for this. Okay. Now, imagine if we had twice as many points here, how long this would take to click. Oops. There we go. And click those. Then I'm going to go to my scale tool and just scale these together. And if I hold shift after I start dragging, you'll see it snaps right to 0. Okay? So now that's nice and flat. Go to my edges, click here, click there, bevel. And this I'm going to bring in to about that. There we go. Okay, so now that looks pretty decent. Now I'm going to add a subdivision to this. Take my divisions off, and there's my wine glass. Okay, so now I'll just label this wine glass. Go to layers, add a new one. Okay, so that works. All right, so now I'm just going to bring my Gillette back and scale it up. So I'm just going to proportionally scale it up so that it feels like these two products live in the same universe. Now I can bring it upwards like this. I'm not moving it away. I'm not moving it left and right. I'm just keeping it right there. I'm going to go into lines so I can see it. Still scaling that up. Actually, right about there was actually pretty good. I think that would be about the same height as the wine glass and about the same height as that. Okay, good. Turn that off, turn that off. And then I should probably save this at some point because I haven't done that at all. This scenes. Okay, so every item that we go through, we're going to model texture. What do you think the texture on the glass is going to look like? Transparent, right? I make cream, I put that inside. I'm not going to go through that in this lecture today. I make cream, what's that going to be? Yeah, it's going to be like white, right? So it's going to be opaque, it's going to be white, it's going to have a very like spread out reflection. Neither of these so far have any kind of labeling on them. It's just color at that point. It's just transparent here, white there. When we get to the Gillette cans, let's turn the wine glass off, turn that on. When we get to this, what is the cap going to look like? Hard. Solid color, nothing fancy. The bottom, what should it have on there? Right. It'll have some metal on there, but we also have that label. Okay? So that label is something that we're going to have to build. Every one of our, not every one of our items needs to have a label, but I want to see at least 2 items in your scene that you've built labels for. If you put items inside your scene that go together, that makes it a lot easier. So if I have this Gillette can here, and then I have this Gillette can there, I'm able to use assets from each one to build the label for each one. If one is a Gillette can, and the other one is a Pepsi can, well, now I have 2 different labels I'm creating, okay? Now, there's nothing wrong with, and where did I see this? It must have been online. Somebody like swapped them. So they had like a Pepsi label on a bag of chips and the chip label on a can. And again, that's kind of like a creative way to kind of show off you can do the stuff and make it fun. Well, you can do that, yeah. So yeah, you can do stuff like that. So I need to create this label. Now, as I create the label, I don't know what I'm going to be building yet, okay? I'm not going to go through the whole process, but I will show you what the step is to get it into Photoshop to build the label, okay? So I'm going to create a material, and I'm going to drop it onto my Gillette. Drop it onto my regular cylinder. I'm going to turn this off. Okay, so there's my cylinder. On here, we're going to be bringing in an image. So I'll show you what an image looks like when I just bring in some random image and put it on there. P drive there. Oops, sorry. Class assignments 2510. Product. Textures. All right, so here is a body lotion texture. Don't copy that, okay? So if I drop this on here, you'll see that it looks like that. Like that doesn't look anything like this image that I have right there. All right, I'm going to bring in a different one. I don't even like that one. Orange label, there we go. No. There we go. So now we can see where the label is at. We can see how it's kind of placed right there. But one thing we'll find out is that the labels inside of a 3D app, or the textures we bring in, they're all 2D, and we're working in a 3D environment. So things like grabbing divisions and moving them around will shift what the texture is doing. Okay? So this one came in not too bad, but I still want to be able to adjust it. When I smooth this, you'll see that it actually changes how it looks, and we actually lose some of our stuff there. Like, it looked pretty good a second ago, but now it's all squishy. Okay? So let me undo, there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a checkerboard under surfaces, under checkerboard, there we go. And then I'm going to go to my checkerboard and I'm going to add a frequency of 10 and 10. Now the goal of this is a checkerboard is a 2D item. It's just flattened out. I want to be able to take this and make sure that I have a perfectly flat area right here. That's where I'm going to be putting my label. I don't care about the label up there. I care about this area. So I need to have that be perfectly square. You'll see in some spots where I have bevels, you can see what the checkerboard looks like. It looks pretty horrible. We have a thing called UV. It's basically how do you take this 3D item and how do you flatten it out. So think of your pop can or anything. Typically you'll see a seam down the side of it. If you were to like cut the seam and then flatten it out, that's what the label would look like, or that's what the UVs would look like for this. So I need to do that to this can. So I'm going to go into my can here. I'm going to go to my startup and I'm going to change my layout to be a BP UV edit. And what this is going to do is it's going to show me this is what your can looks like flattened out. Okay, so that's it. It looks pretty disgusting. I need to lay it out so that it is perfectly flat. So I'm going to grab my faces here. You'll see they moved the face selection up to this area. I'm going to go into my marquee. My options are now down here, so I'm going to make sure it says tolerant, which is on. And I'm going to grab all of these here. Now if I just grab those, it will work for the low-res version. So if I'm going into a video game, perfect. These are the only ones I need. But I'm not. I'm going to render this out at high quality. When I smooth it, watch what happens to those faces I have selected. See how they just compressed and went in on each other. Okay? So I need to actually grab these faces here and more outward. So I'm going to go to Select and Grow. And I'm going to do that again. UI is the hotkey. And hit it one more time. There we go. Okay? So now when I turn this smoothing on, all the faces for that label area I have selected. Okay? Turn that off. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. This is where all the tools are for projection. You can right-click. You can get to the tools this way, but I just do it right here. So I need to project this so that I can get to the, basically like how I want to lay it out. So I'm going to go here and say cylinder. And you'll see now that it laid out that entire thing as one piece. So we don't have these like weird jaggy lines selected. They're all part of this shape. And as I move this, so I just switched to my move tool. It doesn't show anything there, but it's there. Okay? So this is where my label is going to go. All the stuff that's right here, this is all the crap that I don't care about. So all of that, I'm just going to scale down and put into the corner. So I just scale it and throw it there. And then all of this, I'm just going to select and slide back into this position. Okay? So now I have it separated. This is called UV cutting. I've separated the stuff that I need here and separated the stuff I need there. And now I have two separate pieces. Now as I go into my relax area, I can hit apply and it'll relax the faces. So let's just pretend that this is scaled, non-uniform scale. So I'm going to do this. Okay, so these are not squares. If I hit this relax apply, why aren't you working? Auto realign? No. Oh, don't pin. That's what I wanted. There we go. Apply. There we go. These are definitely squares, but they're rotated. So then I go to my rotate tool and I rotate it back to where it is. And now we have squares again. Okay? A cylinder, you typically don't need to do that. More shapes I'll show, you will have to do that. Okay? So I projected it. I have these things flattened. I need to make this as big as possible. I'm going to keep it at scale. Scale this up. And then I just want to check something. I want to make sure I grab the right side. So this here, this small side, this is actually the bottom, and the other side is the top. So I need to rotate this around. And I'm just going to project this again because now it's kind of like wonky. There we go. Project it again. There we go. Okay. Cool. So that's where my label is going to go. This box right here, that's my texture. So when I go into Photoshop or Illustrator or any of these other apps, that's my texture area that I need to create a material or an image. And inside here, that's where my label is going to go. So I'm going to do one more thing just to get this out. So I'm going to go to, do I have it selected? I have it selected. I have the faces selected. Let's do that again. There we go. File, new texture. Give this a name, so this will be Gillette. Give this a resolution. All of our resolutions that we do for textures are in increments of, or powers of 2, 2, 4, 8, 16, blah, blah, blah. 4096 is the magic number, okay? So if you do 4096 by 4096, RGB, I'll leave this as, I guess, a mid-tone for now. It creates that texture. Now I need to fill it in. So I'm going to go to Image. I lied. I'm going to go to Layer. I'm going to say Outline Polygons. And you'll see that I've outlined my polygons in white. And now I can go to Save as a TIFF. Yes. And then drop this into my folder. We'll do this again. So you know, don't think that you have to get everything right away from this. Source images. Gillette can, UV, there we go. And so now what I would do is I would go to my Gillette can, and I would open this up in Photoshop, and I would, or Illustrator or anything, and just start working on building what that label is going to look like. Typically I like to use Photoshop because it's just more intuitive for me, but I can do stuff in Illustrator. You can bring stuff back and forth. You can use InDesign. It doesn't matter. All we need at the end of this is a 4000 by 96 square image of what this is going to look like. There it is. So you can see the layout right here. So I would literally just go in here and just start drawing to create whatever I want my label to be. I'll go into further deep depth for how to create the label, but as long as you get to this point, you're good. Okay? Come on. Now, UVing, I'll tell you, is one of the things that most people hate doing. It's an actual job. Like UV layout is a job at a company where they give you characters and you strip them down and lay out their UVs, and that's what you're doing. Here's a vehicle, here's a building, here's robots, anything. The UVs need to be there in order for the textures to work. Mm-hmm. So would you do this for like texture packs for like a gun game or something? Yep. It does, but once you understand the basics of it, you can do a lot. And I'm going to show you the fun part of once you get stuff laid out and once you have the UVs for it, what you can do with this kind of stuff. Don't download a new one, close that. So we are not in this program right now. All detail side, take that one. But this is a software package that once you do have something laid out, once you do have UVs for it, you can actually do some pretty cool stuff. Like this is, yes, I get that. Here we go. This is a 3D model with all the UVs laid out. I can't put this label on here without having the UVs there, because otherwise it doesn't know where to put it. It basically just like garbles it on top of it and it wouldn't work. But now I can actually, just like Photoshop, I can make a brand new layer and then I can actually paint right on the surface. I should probably pick a brighter color. Okay, so right now we're doing it more controlled, going into Photoshop, making a label. Eventually you get into this kind of stuff where you can do, just literally write on it, or you can use different brushes. So I can go here and say I want my normal map. Sorry, I don't want color on this, I just want that. There you go. And so now I've created that little icon right there, little icon right there. Here's another thing. Whoops. Didn't drag it in. Okay, so now I'm creating like bumpy areas for where these things are at. We can also go to brushes. Nope, not brushes. Hard surface, that was where I was at. Alphas, there we go. And I can do stuff like this. Make sure I have my settings on. Color, there we go. And you'll see very easily I can add this kind of stuff to it. There we go. Okay, so that's later down the line. And you can do like a million things with this. If I just take this, I'm just going to override the whole thing. These are hand painting, so I'm going to do this one, which is really sweet. And just drop this on the top of that. There we go. And so now I have this kind of like grungy, garbagey type of thing. Totally changes the look of the original one. And then even on top of this, I can make a layer and add, you know, my stuff on top of that. But we need to have those UVs laid out to do that. So our Gillette can, or our product item that we have here, it's starting off here, but this is eventually where you would be able to take these kinds of skills. You could actually take your Gillette can, if all the UVs are laid out correctly, you could bring it into this and make like a totally destroyed version of your Gillette can, which was actually one of our assignments years ago. Maybe not too many years ago.